Let's be friends.
Have you not?
And here we go.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals, and welcome back to the Ambassador Wing. And happy Christmas Eve. And hope y'all are having a wonderful Thursday. No, it's Friday. Friday night. And tonight we are back with episode 3 of Christmas Rewind. And tonight we are talking Santa Claus. Who was your favorite? Who was the best on screen, either big or small screen Santa Claus? And as always, I am your host, the Ambassador. Hope you all have a great time tonight. Hope you all enjoy the stream. I will be dropping the link here in just a minute, but just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. I do want to apologize for the delay, but unfortunately, I got home late from work tonight, and I need to have some dinner. I need to get myself cleaned up, and I need to get myself ready for the stream this evening. So thank you all for your patience, and hope you all enjoy the stream, you filthy Christmas maniacs, you filthy animals. So, but tonight, as I said, we are talking Santa Claus. All the on-screen incarnations of this icon of the Christmas season. And we all have our connection to Santa Claus. We all know when we stopped believing or if we still do, part of us still does believe. And speaking for myself, do I still believe in Santa Claus? Yeah, I do. I still believe. Even at 45 years old, I believed that once upon a time there was a person, or there may still be a person, who was old Kris Kringle, old Saint Nick, Santa Claus, whatever name you prefer to call him by. I believe this person did once exist. And I think for all of us, at one point or another, even if today we no longer believe, there's just something about the character of Santa Claus that still is endearing to us, myself included. And this evening, we're going to discuss the various on-screen incarnations of this icon of the Christmas season. Secular speaking. I mean, Santa Claus is a icon of the secular or maybe even the commercial meaning of Christmas, but I think he represents something more than the commercialized portion of the Christmas season. I think there is a part of Santa Claus that even now still represents something more, something better than just the commercial icon that he has in a lot of ways become. And, speaking from a personal aspect, Santa Claus does represent something more than that. For me, Santa Claus is something very personal. And you might be asking, some of you who may not know, some of you who may recall some of the discussions we've had in the past here on the channel. The person of Santa Claus is something something connected to me in a very personal way, because my late Father Ambassador, before his health got to the point where he could no longer do it, he would play Santa Claus. He would dress up and play Santa Claus. He would go to different companies in the town that we lived in. He would go to nursing homes. He would go to hospitals. He would go to churches, including the one that my family was a part of. And he would play Santa Claus for the kids there, or he'd play Santa Claus for the residents at the nursing homes or whatever that he would visit. And it was actually because of him doing that that him and Mother Ambassador did in fact meet, for those of you who did not know this. And this is something I don't mind sharing, because it is is part of my personal history. And it's something that I do enjoy sharing. But for as long as I could remember, Santa Claus has always been a part of me. Even now at the age of 45, I have always been a part of me that has, in fact, believed that this person did exist or does exist, even if he doesn't bring me anything for Christmas anymore. But honestly, my favorite version of Santa Claus will always be my dear old dad, even though he's not with us anymore. But tonight is not about my own personal preferences. For as long as there have been movies and there has been television, there has been the Christmas movie, there has been the Christmas special. And throughout the history of cinema, they have presented various versions and forms of the person of Santa Claus, going all the way back to the black and white era of cinema. I mean, one of the most well known incarnations of Santa Claus, or in this case, Kris Kringle. And this, of course, is a movie that I just reviewed a couple of nights ago here on the channel when I did a review of the two versions of A Miracle on 34th Street. And you had the original 1947 version and you had the 1990s version. And in the 1947 version, you had a actor by the name of Edmund Gwynn, who played Kris Kringle or Santa Claus. And in the 1990s version, you had Sir Richard Attenborough, who's known for this role, but more well known for his role as John Hammond from the Jurassic Park franchise. Of course, there was a film done in the 1980s that starred John Lithgow and Dudley Moore. That was done that presented more of a origin story for the person of Santa Claus. And that version, I think that is honestly one of the best representations of a origin story and the person of Santa Claus that has ever been put on screen. Though it does stray somewhat. It is a 1980s movie. It almost presents Santa Claus as somewhat of an action hero, which is very um unconventional to say the least. But at the same time, the origin itself is sound. It does stick to the origins of Santa Claus, the elves, the reindeer, and all that a lot of us are accustomed to, that we are familiar with. And I think it is not by any means a bad movie. It's very warm, it's very whimsical, it's a good representation, although it does present a interesting element and where you have a rebellious but well-meaning elf played by Dudley Moore who leaves the North Pole and who goes to New York City and meets an industrialist, a businessman played by John Lithgow, and he um works with the industrialist played by John Lithgow. I can't remember the name of the character, but essentially John Lithgow's character wants to replace Santa Claus. He wants to erase Santa Claus and become the new icon of Christmas and use the elf that Dudley Moore plays as a means to supplant Santa Claus, make him a relic of the past. And it's been a very long time since I've seen this movie, but they, instead of the traditional reindeer and sleigh, they come up with a flying car that's all Christmas themed. And they develop a candy cane that can let children actually fly. And it's rather comical because um throughout the course of the movie, Dudley Moore's character, the elf, I can't remember the name of the character off the top of my head, but he doesn't want to just be the atypical elf that's happy to work for Santa. He wants to do more. He wants to improve how they build the toys for all the kids of the world, and he comes up with a very interesting machine that will help um, revolutionize the toy making process for the elves. But unfortunately, the machine goes haywire and all the toys start breaking as soon as they are delivered to the kids. And it causes the kids to lose faith in Santa Claus and the toys are returned. And what they do with Santa in this movie isn't bad. The origin is, like I said, sound. The gentleman that plays Santa in this movie, he is actually the character is a toy maker and he lives in the Nordic countries. I can't remember if it was Norway or Finland or one of those other countries up near the North Pole. But him and his wife, they get lost in a blizzard and everything after delivering toys to a local village. And they discover the castle, Santa Claus Castle. And it's a very interesting introduction for the idea of Santa Claus because you have a rather old actor by this point. For those of you who may remember him from the Rocky movies, particularly the first two Rocky movies, I can't remember the name of the character, but he was the trainer for Rocky. The actor's name is Burgess Meredith. He also played the Penguin on the old um, uh, Adam West Batman live action series back in the 1960s. And he had done a lot of other stuff in his career as well. But he plays essentially the world's oldest elf, and he tells the older gentleman, the toy maker, that he is to become the new Santa Claus. And the movie is, like I said, it's unconventional in the story that it tells, but the performance that is done by the gentleman who plays Santa in this movie, it does stick to the ideal characterization of Santa that we all know and love. And that's one of the main things I like about that movie. Not to mention the costume. He's very much dressed in the older style of clothing for Santa Claus that that we may not be familiar with because he wears the red suit and he has the red hat and the boots and all of that, but his coat and everything, his outer coat is much longer. It goes all the way down to about his ankles or so. And I have to admit, I always liked that version of the costume for Santa, although I do like the more traditional version of the suit. But this one presents a more older world Santa Claus than what we are accustomed to. Now, before we had Miracle on 34th, well, in between Miracle on 34th Street and the 1980s Santa Claus movie, we had all of those stop motion Christmas specials. I mean, you got Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, a Christmas Without Santa Claus, um, The Little Drummer Boy, all of those. And by far, one of my favorites of those is, of course, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And this one is voiced and everything. It's told from the point of view by Santa Claus, one of Santa Claus's official mail carriers. He picks up all the mail, he picks up all the letters from all the kids around the world or in a particular area and delivers them to Santa Claus. And he's actually voiced by a old actor. He's actually the actor's name is Fred Astaire, and he wasn't just an actor, he was a very well-known singer and dancer from back in the musical era of the film industry back in like the 1950s and 60s and so on. And what he does is he presents a origin for Santa going all the way back to when Santa Claus was an infant. And the child is left on the doorstep of um the home of a bunch of elves who make toys. They're toy makers. And they raise the child, and once he gets old enough, they tell him, well, you're not actually an elf like us. We found you were left on our doorstep, and the only identification we found was this little golden tag that has the last name. I can't remember if it was Kringle or Claus. No, it was Kringle. And it has the last name Kringle on it, and that's it. And they said, we named you Chris Kringle. And if you've never seen that animated special, I highly encourage you, because I think it presents one of the most authentic and true to the spirit of the origin of Santa Claus that has ever been put to screen. It is. I don't want to spoil it, but at the same time, I do want to kind of give an idea of why I appreciate this particular version as much as I do. Let me check one thing real quick. Okay. The reason why I like this particular version is it doesn't present a almost a forced conflict in a manner of speaking. Um, though there is a conflict within it, but it takes place in the North Pole, so to speak. Well, it doesn't start in the North Pole. It starts in like um, Austria or Germany, because you have a local town leader named Burgermeister Meisterburger. And you get the idea that this is a Germanic village, a Germanic town, because the head of a town in Germany or Austria would be known as a Burgermeister. And he is very much a stick in the mud. He is a Grinch through and through. He doesn't like the idea of kids getting toys for Christmas, and he just tries to stop Chris at every possible turn. And what we get is the explanation for why kids would hang up their stockings by the fireplace. It was because it was the only place where the Burgermeister and his men would not look for the toys that Chris would deliver. And in that town, Chris meets a very lovely young woman who is a teacher. And they have a very nice love story in this animated feature. And eventually the teacher would eventually become um, Mrs. Claus, because Chris and her would get married. And we meet another character known as the Winter Warlock. And this guy, he's trouble. He's not a nice guy. He's a very troublesome and powerful character. And eventually he does come to Chris's defense, because his heart starts to change, because Chris or Santa gives him a gift, gives him a toy, and a toy that he very much appreciates. And eventually the warlock is on Chris or Santa Claus's side. It's a very endearing special. It's about an hour long, give or take, as most of those specials were back in those days. Um, Again, the special is called Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And if you've never seen it or you haven't watched it in a long time, I would definitely encourage you to do so, because it is most definitely worth your time. It is a very, even if you're older like me, it's still one of those Christmas specials that, even at this age, my age, or your age, there's still something special about it. Now, there, of course, is also, now he is not the main character in this particular special, but there, of course, there is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and this, of course, is the origin of Rudolph. This is one that I imagine a lot of us have watched and everything as we've grown up over the years. And I even talked to a few of my coworkers over the last few days and asked them, "Do you still watch any of these?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, definitely." Or we watch them with our kids or our grandkids or whatever, and everything for those that are old enough to have grandkids. And we know the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. In this particular version, he was born to one of Santa's reindeer and his mate, and he's born with the big red honker. And the Santa in this particular version, he's like I said, he's not the main character, but I will say, um, he's not the Santa we would be accustomed to because he's a little more I don't want to say adversarial, but he's a little more dismissive of Rudolph and all the other misfit toys when Rudolph and Clarice bring back all the misfit toys from the island of misfit toys. And Santa has a change of heart. He's like, I was too hard on Rudolph. And I think that's one of the things I like about this particular version because it shows that Santa Claus is imperfect. Yes, he is a person who loves children. Yes, he does all these very nice, lovely things for the children of the world, but he doesn't always get it right. And he finally is like, Rudolph, there's only one way I'm going to be able to deliver the toys this year. I need you. Will you help? And of course, Rudolph says, "Yeah, of course, Santa. That's all I've ever wanted was to be part of the team, to work with my dad." And I think that's I love when Santa actually quotes this one of the lines from the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He's like, "Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" And I always get a chuckle. I do. But that particular version of Santa and everything, like I said, he's not a main character, but he's still obviously integral to the story that's told. Um, we'll jump ahead because I've already talked about the 1980s um, Santa Claus movie. Because I want to go in kind of chronological order in terms of the movies that have all featured Santa Claus or all the animated specials or whatever the stop motion animation specials. To of course, Miracle on 34th Street. Now, I talked about this the other night, so I won't linger on it too long. But there are a couple other things I wanted to say in terms of Richard Attenborough or Sir Richard Attenborough's performance as Kris Kringle in the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. Also to the other gentleman, Edwin Gwynn, who played Santa in the 1947 version. The thing I liked about this is it presented a more human face to Santa than we have ever seen before. This is not a Santa who is just starting out as Santa Claus. This is Santa Claus after many generations of children have existed in the world that he has been Santa Claus, and he has made a delivery on Christmas Eve to deliver all the toys to the good kids of the world. But the thing I particularly like about Attenborough and Gwynn's performances, as I said, is it gives more of a human face than we are accustomed to. It gives some depth and complexity to the character of Santa Claus than we've ever seen before. Because we always imagine Santa Claus as this almost mythic or magical being, which he in some ways very much is. I mean, how does Santa Claus do all the things he does? How does he deliver toys to all the children of the world in one night? And I love what Richard Attenborough says. I think he's riding on a bus or in a taxi or something. Or no, he's actually riding in a limousine. And the two people that work for the other department store ask him, like, how do you do this? How do you do it? He's like, well, it's all a matter of how you perceive time. Imagine a minute is an hour. Imagine a week is a month. Imagine several months is or several months is a year. it's all a perception of time. And he's like, I'm able to alter the perception of time so that I can deliver all the toys to all the children of the world. And honestly, I think it's one of the most straightforward and easiest to understand explanations for how Santa does deliver all the toys to all the children of the world in one single night. It's he manipulates time. And I think that for me is one of the coolest aspects of his character. Now, granted, that's not presented in the original version with Edmund Gwynn, but it doesn't detract necessarily. It adds an additional layer because we've always understood that Santa Claus is a magical being, or he understands some forms of magic or mysticism. I've just preferred to call it just regular magic and everything because anything else would be out of place. Now, there is one version of Santa, and I did not. I'll come back to everything. Actually, no, I'll stick on these. As I said, the Santas in both versions of Miracle on 34th Street have a more human face. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Because they both express self doubt, because they both express um, moments of self reflection. They express this questioning of whether or not I am still relevant to the Christmas season, even though Christmas has become very commercialized and very secularized. Because even Santa recognizes um, what the world has done to this Christmas season, and I think we see it as well. But to hear it come out of Santa Claus's own mouth, I think really hits home in a way that is more impactful for all of us. When Chris is sitting in, and this is in both versions, obviously, for those of you that haven't watched the that stream and everything on Miracle on 34th Street, when Chris is committed to Bellevue Hospital, psychiatric hospital, because they think he's nuts, because he believes he actually is Santa Claus, when in fact we know that he is actually Santa Claus. But he's like, maybe the world has passed me by. Maybe I am no longer relevant. Maybe the world no longer needs me. And whether it's either Mr. Gailey or Mr. Bradford, depending on the version, who tell him, no, I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to get the charges dropped, and you're not, because the world still needs you. The kids of the world still need you, and not to mention Susan and Dory or Doris or Dory still need you. And there's a truth to that. Because to be a little real here for just a minute, we all know how commercialized the Christmas season has become. Even I, as a Protestant now turned Catholic, even back then I understood that the Christmas season has become commercialized in a lot of ways. But there are two things that stave off the full commercialization of the Christmas season. Obviously, the one that is most important is the Christian faith, whether you view it from a Protestant or a Catholic perspective. And the other is the person of Santa Claus. Yeah, we go to a department store or we go to a mall or whatever and we get our picture taken with a Santa Claus. This is true. I've done it. I imagine a lot of you have. But there is something about Santa that allows us to still, even if it's for the briefest moment, to believe as a child believes that magic exists, that a person like Santa Claus can or does exist in the world that staves off or drives away all those cynical and hurt feelings that we might have about the Christmas season. And believe me, for a lot of you who know me, you know the Christmas season's not always easy for me. For those of you who do not know, I'll say this briefly. It was December of 1984 when, unfortunately, my father, my Santa Claus, passed away. But, and though there are days in this month when it is a little bit harder than others to not feel sad because my dad isn't here anymore. I know that he would not want me to grieve too much or too heavily. Not grieve at all, but to remember the happiness that he brought me and my mother both, and the happiness that he brought to all the people around him. And that's what the person of Santa Claus can do for all of us. It can remind us that we still, even in the face of rampant commercialization and cynicism and even atheism, there is a part of us that still remembers what it means to believe in the impossible, to believe in magic, to believe in Santa. And and of course, as often happens, if you've ever seen Miracle on 34th Street, Chris is cleared of all charges. He's ruled not insane, and he's allowed to make his yearly trip. And he does prove to Doris and Susan that he is who he says he is, because he does deliver on his promise to Susan that she will have a family and she will have a home. Because Santa Claus, even if it's a trickier job than most, he always finds a way. Now that brings me to a somewhat lesser known version of Santa, and I think a somewhat lesser known Christmas movie. And I wanted to take some time and acknowledge this particular one because it is a favorite of mine, though it has been a while since I watched it. For those of you who might remember the character of Ernest from the different Ernest Goes To movies or anything, Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Goes to Jail, Ernest Scared Stupid, and even Ernest Saves Christmas. And to the chat, CJH. CJ, it's good to see you, buddy, and Merry Christmas, my friend. Good. It's always good to see you. Hope you're having a good night. Ernest Saves Christmas is one of those, I think, oftentimes overlooked Christmas movies because it is much more comical than we are accustomed to seeing. And not to by any means say it's a bad movie, but it is a very cheesy cornball movie, which is the case with all of the Ernest movies throughout the years when Jim Varney played the character of Ernest. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with the character of Ernest, you might recall Jim Varney did do the voice of Slinky Dog, at least the first 2 or 3 movies in the Toy Story franchise before he unfortunately passed away. And if you can't connect with Ernest, I imagine a lot of you can probably much more easily connect with Slinky Dog. Ernest played this character, Ernest P. Worrell, who was kind of a screw up, kind of a goofball, but a well-meaning screw up and a well-meaning goofball. He would get into all these different wacky antics and everything in all these different movies. And in Ernest Saves Christmas, he actually meets a Santa Claus who is looking to pass on the torch, pass it on to someone new, someone younger that can take up the mantle because he has gotten too old. And Ernest tells Santa, I will help you. And as often happens, things go screwy when Ernest gets involved. And there's even a sequence in the movie where Ernest tries to take Santa's place. And it is just a complete and utter disaster. And I don't mean that lightly. It is a mess. Complete and total and utter mess. And eventually the guy that Santa is looking to take his place, take up the mantle, does eventually say, you know what? Yes, I will do it because the world does need Santa Claus. But the older Santa, the one that's looking to retire, he is played a little more comically, which is true with a lot of his incarnations. The character of Santa Claus has always been somewhat of a comedic or jovial character, which is his nature. But the funny thing is, the humor is ratcheted up just a little bit in this movie, but I think that's due to the nature of the film itself because Ernest Saves Christmas and all the other Ernest Saves or Ernest Goes to movies are very campy, they're very cheesy, they're very cornball. But they're fun. They are fun. And the one thing I remember from those movies, there's a few things I recall from that particular one with Ernest Scared Stupid. Or not Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Saves Christmas. Sorry. Wrong holiday. Ernest Scared Stupid was the Halloween movie where he fights goblins and trolls. But Ernest is in the sleigh and he's trying to drive the sleigh with the reindeer, and the reindeer are like, who the hell is this guy? Does he even know what the hell he's? Does he even know what he's doing? Obviously, the reindeer don't talk, but you can tell by their facial expressions that they're like, "Yeah, this guy is not cut out for this. We need him. Where's the boss at? Where's Santa? Where's Chris? Where's the old man at? We need him. Chris, help us!" So, but if you've never seen Ernest Saves Christmas, watch it at least once. You will not regret it. You will have a good laugh, and it is, like I said, it is a very charming and a very heartwarming movie. So, and it's definitely worth your time. Now, the next one is more recent. I think this is from the 1990s and the early 2000s. And yes, I know that there is at least one. There's two sequels to this, although I only saw one of them. I didn't see all of them. It is the Santa Claus with Tim Allen. Now, when I heard that they were doing, when I saw the trailers for these movies, obviously at the time I was a huge fan, still am a huge fan of Tim Allen. Primarily from his stand up and obviously from the hit TV the hit TV show Home Improvement. And I was like, Tim Allen as Santa Claus. This could work. This could work. And it most definitely did work because obviously they did two sequels. Apparently, they did a spin-off series on, I think, Disney Plus or something called The Clauses or something like that. But we'll focus on at least the first two movies, the first two that I saw, because I never saw The Escape Clause with Martin Short as Jack Frost. That one I did not see, but I did see the original. I did see the sequel, the Santa Claus 2. Now, this particular version of Santa is very unconventional because it's more of a contract, in a matter of speaking, where if one Santa Claus dies or retires, another the person who's closest in proximity to him takes up the mantle. And apparently, this is something that has gone on for years upon years upon years upon years and years and years and years and years. And you have Tim Allen playing this guy named this businessman named Scott Calvin. And he's unfortunately divorced from his wife, but they have shared custody of their son. And this particular version of Santa is very unorthodox, but not in a bad way by any stretch. I think what they did with the person of Santa Claus in this particular version was they flipped the script. And they flipped it in such a way that made it somewhat of a fish out of water story. But here you have Tim Allen as this businessman, Scott Calvin, who unintentionally kills Santa. And he puts on the suit and he tries to do his best to deliver all the toys to all the children of the world. And then he eventually goes back to the North Pole. Anything, the sleigh's kind of like an automatic pilot. And he meets all the elves and everything. And he meets Bernard, the head elf, who's kind of a curmudgeon, but he means well. And he's like, I can't do this. I'm not Santa. I'm a business guy. I'm Scott Calvin. I'm not Santa Claus. They're like, you picked up the card, you put on the suit, you're Santa Claus. He's like, no, I'm not. They're like, okay, you say so. Fine, we'll send you back. And they do. And over the course of a year, he starts to go through lots of physical changes. He starts getting hairier. He starts growing a beard. He starts getting fatter. And there's one scene in particular that there's several scenes, but there's one scene that I absolutely love. And he has just completely shaved his face and colored his hair. And within a matter of seconds, his hair goes white, grows all back, and the beard grows full back and white as well. And he looks in the mirror. He's like, I'm in deep trouble. Mm-hmm. Even to this day, I cannot help but laugh at that scene. And, you know, his ex-wife is with another guy who's actually a psychologist played by Judge Reinhold. And Reinhold's character, the psychologist, is like, I stopped believing in Santa because Santa Claus never brought me an Oscar Mayer weenie whistle. And they're like, really? An Oscar Mayer weenie whistle caused you to stop believing in Santa? He's like, yeah, it's the one thing I wanted, and Santa Claus didn't bring it. And he's like, that's how I knew there wasn't a Santa Claus. And at the end of the movie, Scott, Tim Allen's, or at this point, Santa Claus, drops 3 presents out of his sleigh for his ex-wife, for his son, and for the psychologist. And he opens it up, and sure enough, there it says Oscar Mayer weenie whistle. He actually blows on it. But what I like about this particular version of Santa is it's not like any of the others I've discussed before now. Either it was a guy who was already atypical, fixed, or perfect fit for the position as Santa Claus, but this one, the guy has to come to it slowly over time. And he's going through all these changes, these physical changes. He's gaining weight, he's growing a beard and white hair. And he's like, this doesn't make any sense. And there's one scene that I also get a chuckle out of. He's walking down the street and he's got this radar in his head where he can go, this person nice, this person naughty, this person nice, this person naughty. And he walks by this very attractive young woman and he's like, I can't remember the name of the woman, but he's like, nice, very, very, very nice. And the woman looks by him and he's just like, in your dreams, fat boy. It gets me. It gets me every time I see that scene. With the sequel, the one that the Santa Claus 2, the one I did see, because like I said, I didn't see Santa Claus 3, the escape clause. And I didn't see the continuation on from there. We learned that he's only fulfilled part of the clause. He has to get married because there has to be a Mrs. Claus. Everything for with the because it happened so sudden. That particular clause wasn't enacted, but he's been Santa Claus for at least a year or so now. He has to get married, otherwise he loses his ability to stay as Santa. So he's on the hunt for the ideal Mrs. Claus, and eventually he does meet her. If I remember correctly, she's actually a school teacher, and she has to come to the realization, my gosh, this guy is actually Santa Claus. That he wants me to be Mrs. Claus. How do I turn him down? I mean, if I do this, I destroy Christmas, in a manner of speaking. I destroy him. He loses all the abilities to be Santa Claus. If I do marry him, I get to be Mrs. Claus. Yeah, I have to give up my career, in a manner of speaking, or I have to give up doing it as I have been doing it normally. But at the same time, I'm Mrs. Claus. Not a bad setup. And there's one. It has been a very long time since I've seen the Santa Claus 2, but there's one. Okay, I do remember the animatronic or the robotic Santa Claus, and he builds an army of other Santa Clauses to take over the North Pole. And there's this whole big fight scene between all the robotic Santa Clauses and the elves and so on. Eventually, all of the robotic Santa Clauses are destroyed, and Santa comes back with Mrs. Claus, and everything's made normal. The other part that I remember, and this is actually a really cute, sweet scene. It's when Scott Calvin or Santa Claus is courting or romancing the teacher and everything, and he actually takes her on a sleigh ride in a horse-drawn sleigh, and he actually makes it snow. I always liked that scene because it's very sweet, it's very
My
cute.
favorite scene.
I'm ambassador. She would know. She's got good taste.
Actually, no. My favorite scene in that movie is when he gives her the doll.
That's a good one too. That's a good one too, sweetie. But honestly, granted, it is a more modernized version of how a person can become Santa. It still has a lot of charm to it. It has a lot of good moments in it. Both movies, everything, both those movies do. Because, like I said, I'm not going to critique something I haven't watched, and I've never watched Santa Claus 3: The Escape Clause. I know of the basic premise of it, but I never watched it because by the time that one had come out, I was like, I've seen the first two. I'm good. I don't need to see another Tim Allen Santa Claus movie. Everything. It's not that I had a personal gripe against him or anything. It's just it wasn't my thing at that time. But that brings us to the question of the night. Of all the Santas I have listed off here, and I've discussed the movies and so on, which one is either the best or my personal favorite? And CJ, if you're still in the chat and everything, I'd be more than happy to hear you chime in on this one, buddy. So, And this is also for those of you that'll catch us on the replay. Who is your favorite? Who's your favorite Santa? Whether it's one that I listed or one that I didn't. Because there's probably more out there that I may have forgotten about, but I wanted to hit upon the major ones and everything that I've discussed so far. Each performance, each version brings something different to the person of Santa Claus. And the question becomes, it comes down to, honestly, to two things. It comes down to the performance and it comes down to personal preference. As far as I am concerned, whether it was a voice role or it was a on-screen acting role, I think all the actors from Edwin Gwynn and Sir Richard Attenborough to the gentleman who played Santa Claus in the 1980s movie, or the voice actors who played Santa in Santa Claus is Coming to Town and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Ernest Saves Christmas and the Santa Claus with Tim Allen. It's because each performance is different in its own way. Each actor brings a different energy and a different feel, and obviously each movie is different in terms of the tone that is being presented. But which one is, I think, truest to the spirit of the person of Santa Claus that we are all accustomed to? That's the real question. Which one is the truest? And obviously, it's going to be from my own perspective, and I'm going to try and be as unbiased as I can be. But I think for myself, at least, it's going to come down to which Santa do I feel is the most authentic? Which Santa embodies everything that I would believe that if Santa Claus was or is a real person, what he would actually be like. Now, I'm going to offer one caveat. There are a couple where Santa Claus is just starting out in his time as that person, and also not at the end of his time. So that does eliminate two right there. That eliminates Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and that does eliminate Ernest Saves Christmas. But like I said, by no means are either one of those bad shows or movies. The ones that remain, and that's Miracle on 34th Street, the Santa Claus, and the 80s Santa Claus movie. I'm honestly going to have to say, of those that still remain from my list, hmm, hmm, this is the tricky part. I'm going to have to say, of the ones that I've listed here tonight, I think my personal favorite, and this is by no means dismissing or disregarding any other of the other performances, I'm going to have to say that it's Sir Richard Attenborough from the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. That, for me at least, is my favorite and I think the best version of Santa Claus. Because that particular performance covers a lot of bases. It covers the bases that we would all expect it to, but it also covers bases that we're not accustomed to. Because it makes Santa Claus feel the most human. It makes Santa Claus feel the most true to what we would expect him to act like. And his performance just gives you a good feeling. And I think all of those reasons across the board make Sir Richard Attenborough's performance the best. But that's just my opinion. So, once this stream goes public and everything is finished processing or downloading or whatever, and you watch it through, leave your comments down below. Who for you is your favorite Santa? Is it one of the ones I listed? Or is it a different one? So, but I want to thank all of you who tuned in tonight, whether you were watching, whether you're active, or whether you were just lurking, whether you're watching on YouTube or X. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this stream. I know, and again, I do want to apologize, but I did not expect to get caught up at work like I did. But this time of year, the Christmas season, we're always busy. So unfortunately, sometimes schedules don't always stick the way they should. But before I wrap up, I do want to say a few closing things before I close out for the night. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you all have a blessed 2024. Because this will probably be my last stream for the year unless I decide to go live next week. I'm not sure yet if I will. But I want to thank you all for your time and for your patience with me over the last several months. I know that my streaming schedule has been very sporadic, but most of you know that my health hasn't been the best, but I'm getting better. And 2024, I'm going to come out, metaphorically speaking, guns blazing. I'm going to get back in the streaming game again more regularly, and I'm going to get back into doing a lot more uploads than I had over the last several months. But above all, particularly this time of year, take some time, slow down, and enjoy this time of year. Because it is truly one of the best times of the year. I know that's not true for everybody, and I do understand that, believe me. I struggle myself. But if you're able to slow down, take a breath, and enjoy this very precious and very wonderful time of year. Whether you are a Christian or you see it simply from a secular perspective. Because especially now with everything that's going on in the world, I think we all need a little more peace on earth and goodwill towards our fellow man. I know that's true for me. It's always easy to be the optimist. And it's always easy to try and be the peacemaker. But this time of year is one of those times when we're all reminded of both those ideals. To bring peace to our fellow man, to our friends and our family. And it's because it's not just the Christian thing to do if you're a Christian, but it's simply the right thing to do just as a person. And I think that the person of Santa Claus is the ideal. He's the benchmark for what we should be as people. We shouldn't be cruel and bitter and selfish and self-centered and only thinking of ourselves. He's kind. He's warm. He's loving. He's generous. And he's who we all hoped we would be as people when we all grew up, and who we all try to be now that we are grown up. I know that's true for me. I hope in some ways that's true for all of you as well. But again, I say a very Merry Christmas to you all. Have a very blessed and peaceful and restful and wonderful Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Again, I will see you all in 2024. And as I like to say when I close these out, have integrity, be honest, be yourself. Never take yourself too seriously. And if you do all those things, you'll always have a place in the ambassadorial wing. And until next time, this is the ambassador saying, Merry Christmas. See y'all next time.
Let's be friends.